friends, it's finally time to talk about it. Who on earth is Melchizedek? This mysterious figure that our author has mentioned 3 times before our reading today, and now here in chapter 7, he is going to discuss Melchizedek at length, talking about how he and Jesus share some similar characteristics. Who is this guy? Why is he significant? Is he some Old Testament character that was super important that I didn't know about? No, don't worry if you don't know who Melchizedek is. He, in the grand scheme of the story of the Bible, is kind of a blip on the radar. He shows up first in Genesis 14. He has a little encounter with Abraham there. And then in Psalm 110, the psalmist looks at Melchizedek and says, our Messiah is going to be a priest and a king at the exact same time, just like Melchizedek was, because Melchizedek was both priest and king at once. Our author here, I think, is bringing up Melchizedek to tackle a question that the Jewish Christians might have had, which is this. I love the idea that Jesus is my greater priest, that he is the high priest I've always needed. But what gives him the right to be a priest? How is he qualified? Here's the thing about the Levitical priesthood. Genealogy, the family you're from, the ancestors you have, was everything. It was everything. Because throughout Israel's history, most of the kings come from the line of David, which means the tribe of Judah. And the priests come from the tribe of Levi. And we know Jesus was born of the tribe of Judah. So our Jewish Christian audience that our author is writing to might be thinking to themselves, I like this idea, but you gotta tell me, what gives Jesus the authority as a non-Levite to be my high priest? And the author answers that question by looking at Melchizedek and saying, Jesus isn't a Levitical priest. You're right. He's not from the right tribe for that. He's a priest of a different kind. He is a priest from the order of Melchizedek. Priest from the order of Melchizedek. And he begins in verses 1 through 4 of our reading today by talking about Melchizedek's interaction with Abraham. Let me boil it down and give you a synopsis, if in case you haven't read Genesis 14 recently. Abraham has just arrived in the land of Canaan, where God has directed him to go. And one day while he is luxuriating underneath the shade of a tree, a scout runs up to him and says, Abraham, there is a war breaking out and your nephew has been captured. So Abraham springs into action, launches himself into the middle of the war, claims victory, saves Lot, his nephew, and as he is riding back home in victory, out comes from the city of Salem a king named Melchizedek, who is a king and also a priest of God Most High. And Melchizedek blesses Abraham and shares a bountiful feast with him. And then Abraham does something crazy. He gives him, Melchizedek, a tenth of everything he has. A tenth of everything he has. He's coming home with all the spoils of this war that he just won and gives 10% of it away to this man named Melchizedek. And so our author is going to pick up on this and say, verse 4, see how great this man Melchizedek was, to whom Abraham the patriarch gave a tenth of the spoils. And those descendants of Levi, the Levitical priesthood, who received the priestly office, have a commandment in the law to take tithes, which are 10%, from the people, that is, from their brothers, though these are also descended from Abraham. But this man, Melchizedek, who does not have his descent from them, received tithes from Abraham, and is blessed by him who had the promises. They're pulling out this mystery that Abraham ties to Melchizedek, who's not a Levitical priest. The Levitical priesthood actually won't exist for centuries after this encounter, and yet Abraham shows Melchizedek great honor and deference, treats him as a superior by giving him a tenth of everything. How curious, the author says. Verse 7. It is beyond dispute that the inferior is blessed by the superior. In the one case, tithes are received by mortal men, but in the other case, by one of whom it is testified that he lives. One might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. Whew! If you are confused and overwhelmed, I don't blame you. Take a breath. Let me translate what our author is saying. They're pointing out, okay, there's this Melchizedek guy who is being treated as a Levitical priest before the Levitical priesthood ever existed. And he is being given this great amount of wealth by Abraham. And so here's the argument that our author is making. If Abraham gave tithes to the Melchizedek, that means that he thinks Melchizedek is greater than him. And since the Levitical priests descend from Abraham, like all of Israel descends from Abraham, if the Levitical priests descend from Abraham, that means that Melchizedek is also greater than the Levitical priesthood. Do you see the lineup he's creating here? Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. The Levites are descended from Abraham. Therefore, Melchizedek is greater than the Levitical priesthood. And by saying that Jesus is from the order of Melchizedek, what's the author saying? He's greater than the Levitical priesthood, which would have been an astounding thing for our first century Jewish Christians that he's writing to. We're going to continue this line of thought tomorrow with a whole lot more takeaways then. So I'm just going to ask you this. Hang in there with me. Tune in for the video tomorrow. If this still feels murky, check out the email. There's more detail there. There is a lot of richness that can come from understanding what it means for Jesus to be our priest and what he offers us as priest. So don't give up if it's dense. Dig in. I think it'll be worth it. Take care, friends.